This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
Hello and welcome to episode 139 of Slick Talk. I'm your host, Blackstone Joe, and I'm glad you're here. On today's episode, I have Chris with me, another analyst on the team. He's a fairly recent addition to the building, but one that has already made his mark not only in terms of writing reports, but also helping put together a recent edition of our gas and diesel newsletter. There's a lot that goes into crafting our newsletters, and Chris is here to break that process down. Now that's enough prologue, let's go ahead and break it down with Chris and I in studio. All right. So Chris, welcome to the show, report writer extraordinaire.
Oh, stop it.
Your reports have character, so I would like to ask what has informed your writing style?
Most of my background professionally is newspaper work. That's what I went to college for. It's what I did straight out of college. COVID kind of threw that off, and I've worked some different jobs in between there. But honestly, I look at these as almost little articles. It's just like writing for, the sports when you get a football spreadsheet. Same thing. I'm looking through here, trying to make a narrative out of it because there's a lot of data, and I could say, hey, this guy ran X amount of yards and scored this. This car produced this amount of iron. But if you don't understand what that means or have any kind of references, it doesn't go as far. So I do catch myself writing things like newspaper style according to blank and a lot of little technical things in there. And so that's definitely what I think what I brought into it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it more conversational because a lot of times I will get checklisty, go through the stats, and here's what's there. But there's definitely, again, trying to tie that into being factual and being accurate, but giving the right information and not just wasting your time. It doesn't help to say, you made this amount of iron. Okay, well, what do you do with that? Again, going back to the newspaper thing, I can say, this bill was introduced. If I don't explain to you what that means and tell you what it means in accordance to something else, there's not a lot of reference point there. So that's definitely where I come from. And I try to be more humorous. A lot of y'all are a lot better at it than I am. Again, I try to be factual and mix that up. It doesn't always work, but yeah.
A lot of what you just spoke to is what we're known for, having personality in our reports, but sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't. So how do you find the situation where you can shine creatively and approach the report with some character that people might not be expecting?
Yeah, it's about finding context, and there's different kinds of context for everything, whether it's what somebody calls their truck, whether we've seen it 10 times before, and I don't want to waste your time and just repeat myself. It can be little notes that they might leave, where they're based off of. If you're in Alabama and send us in an oil sample, I'm going to say Roll Tide at the end of almost every report.
It lets people know you're paying attention.
Without a doubt, and that's the big part of it. And I remember picking that up in training, where if you just pick onto a detail, whether you make it humorous or not, having that detail there gives you a connection where it's not just a spreadsheet spitting out numbers at you.
One thing this job has definitely done, I think, is improve my writing style. One of those aspects is Kristen took the passive voice and literally just removed it from my system. I cannot do it unless I have no way out. Is there any way that you can tell you've improved or anything you've picked up from other writers? Because I know that I definitely borrow turns of phrase, structure. I absorb a lot from the writers around me. Have you noticed any tangible difference since you've come on board with your writing?
Yeah, without a doubt. When we're starting and you're trying to be, accurate, I feel like there's not as much room to be creative or things. You're trying to spell it all out. Now that I've been here for over a year, I pick up on things that you say. I have a spreadsheet of things that I have copied and pasted from other reporters that I'm going to keep. One of those is on yours. I like the way you talked about fuel in one situation. I throw that in. Obviously, you mix things up here and there depending on the situation, but we're so influenced by wanting to be good at it. I noticed in a report yesterday I was proofing the way one of our writers talked about maintaining viscosity instead of just viscosity is correct. The oil maintained the proper viscosity for this. And I probably said that 8 times today. I love picking up on little things like that. Like you said, Kristen knocked that out of your writing process. I have a list of things just that she has said. Sticky notes to look
Yep.
out for if Kristen's proofing my stuff today. Don't say this word, don't use that phrase.
Yep.
So it has definitely influenced it, and it's not because they're picky or because I think, oh my gosh, Joe just writes everything better than I do. It's, again, trying to be accurate and be good at it. I want to say things that are easily understandable. I want to write this out in a way that, one, fits in our structure, not a ton of space to spell things out there. So when I notice that somebody else has done a concise way of explaining something, especially with the technical stuff where you say the wrong thing and it could totally have a different meaning. So I've definitely picked that up from other people. On the writing side of things, I came in with a big head and I thought, I'm good at writing. I've got an English degree.
Yep.
Well, so do most of the other people here. And I love that challenge. Kristen
Yeah.
will hit me with a, hey, tomorrow, don't say this phrase at all. And
Yeah.
it makes you think a little bit differently, and it makes you slow down and look at the sample and really say, what's going on here? What's the best way to explain it to a customer who spent their money and expect to get something back? They're not looking for a spreadsheet. There are really cool labs that do good work that will send you back a spreadsheet, and that's not what we're doing. So it's totally building upon itself, snowballing from I just want to say the right things to how do I say this in a way that explains things to the customer and keeps their interest. There'll be people who've had 10 reports, and if I just say all's good, like, that's nice. And it probably is all good. We could probably just leave it at that. But having that extra challenge and attention to the detail, it just keeps us sharp for everything else.
Now I want to switch gears to why I wanted to talk to you in the first place, which you helped put together the latest newsletter. And that's something we haven't talked about too much on the show. So tell me how you got involved with the newsletter.
I just answered, Kristen had asked if anyone was interested. And I went ahead and said, yeah, actually I am. Not, to brown nose or anything, but just that's what my history is in. One of my favorite parts of working in the newspaper and even going through college was learning those design apps. Quark, I like more than most people. In design, for some reason, my brain clicks with
InDesign. Wow, I haven't used that since high school.
No, but for some reason that works for me. For this one, I had to learn a new program called Quark. It's close enough to Photoshop, but not quite the same. So it's definitely a little bit rusty and had to make some differences there. But that's what I like to do. That was a way that I felt like I could contribute, especially if Kristen is the one asking and saying, hey, I need somebody to do this. It's like, well, yes, I want to impress you and also contribute something. And so it's a really cool setup. She has so much data, so many files that have been sent over to me. It definitely keeps me on my toes.
So people, I think, really value the newsletter, and it's something that before the podcast was like our first way of reaching out and connecting in a way beyond the report itself. So what did you collect? What were you putting together? What caught your eye when you were in this process of assembling this newsletter?
Well, it had to do, one, I went back and read all the old ones. And Jim Stark, our founder, had a very interesting way with words that I wouldn't have expected. I think my initial thought of him was a very buttoned-up business worker. And I can now see that that's not the case. Y'all can get online and see, stuff that he wrote a decade ago that's still really relevant. And so that's just impressive. So it was a way for me to force myself to learn about these uncommon problems, things that some people might see regularly, but other times, when it comes to the reports of the month, which are really popular, if you've had a really nice truck and it's tested well for the last 5 years, you might not know some of these issues exist. There are examples you've never seen. If you're only an aircraft customer, you might have no idea what we talk about when it comes to a diesel truck or a hydraulic unit or anything. And so I just think about that guy out there who's got 10 good reports and he's never had a bold mark, never found fuel or any high metals and has no idea what that looks like. Well, here's the worst case scenario. Here's what it's going to look like if you ignore these issues, if something goes wrong. And I think that draws people in. And then when you get to do an article on top of that, you get to have more than your 4 sentences explanation, here's what's going on. And with the articles, you really get to expand on that.
So putting this newsletter together, have you been keeping an eye on the release and the traffic and just sort of the impact that it has?
Yeah, without a doubt. This is the second one that I've put out. The first one with the help of the higher-ups. This one was the first one that I did on my own. And so figuring out all the website quirks and emails, it is a lot. I want to say we have over 200,000 emails in the gas and diesel list. And so I have to go through every single one of those. If you unsubscribe and you're listening to this, I have to go in and manually delete you from that.
So don't do it.
Yeah, no, you keep listening. Please, it is so much work. I think the day I sent it out, I got over 300 responses saying I'm out of the office for a week. So just 300 of that. And so it's really cool. We can go in and see how many people clicked on this link, how many people read to the bottom of this. And so that's a really cool, because we stay busy and you don't really think about the turnaround when it comes to customers. But having people that I can see have been in this email list for years, they're the ones who respond. They're the ones who have questions about it. And like I said, being able to introduce people to these new issues. If y'all had seen the one from last week, the washboard cylinders, I had never seen that before. I've seen plenty of bad cylinders and piston work before, but that was a specific situation where the customer was lucky enough to catch it before it got real bad and sent us the pictures. A lot of times we don't get that feedback after something fails. We don't always get those pictures. And so then that was a way I got to educate pretty much our whole staff and 30,000 people who actually clicked on it of, hey, this is an issue that can happen. It's very unlikely, but if it does, if you are boroscoping and you see the inside of your cylinders have that washboard pattern going up and down them, hey, this is what might have caused that, and here's what you should do next. Because if you think about it, there are millions of cars on the road today, not quite as many planes, but a good deal, that are going to take off and land without any issues, never have to look into anything. And then when something does happen, well, then what do? Is it too late for oil analysis? Is something already an issue? So being able to point out, hey, guys, this is unusual, and it shouldn't happen to you, but if it does, you're not alone. It keeps me on my toes because I have to look up all the ADs and everything that goes with it, but it also, again, educates our staff and people out there that, hey, this is possible.
You talk about traffic and people responding. We had a pretty big change in, I don't want to say policy, procedure, but our oil information slip underwent a pretty big change by removing the question about the TBN. How much feedback was centered around that change and how we're steering away from the TBN as a measure for interest in extended oil use?
A decent amount. I definitely got some phone calls that first day. One guy in particular was like, well, you just sent me a TBN report. I just got it an hour ago. Is it still relevant? And it still is. It's not like this is not science that is lost to us. We just think after we've seen as much data, there's a better way of predicting that, which is one thing that I really like about this company. We are not stuck in our ways. If the data shows something, if we find a better way to test or can offer a better, outlook on something, we do it.
Right.
And I think that's really cool. So yeah, a lot of people do have that concern, but realistically, testing that TAN number, if that gives you better results, then it's fine to change that up. That's something I am trying to push now that I'm doing this. I want Ryan to let me experiment a little bit. I'm going to see if I can't find an old transmission and test the oil every couple of weeks, see where that TAN number changes, if it does at all, and then relay that back out to our customers. Hey, we made this change in the last couple months. Well, look at the tests that we've done and show how it stands up. And so I think being able to do that and not just look at reports and this is what we say, here's what you see, pushing the education side of things, not only on our end so we can be accurate, but so we can protect the customer's investments and their lives in certain cases. Honestly, there was one recent response. I think Brian had taken the phone call, one of our other analysts, real rock star, that Brian, quite the guy.
Sure is.
Who had called right after that had gone out and had a similar issue. And Brian passed along to me. He's like, hey, this guy says you saved his life. I was like, that's pretty drastic. But
not nothing.
But it's not nothing. When you're in an airplane, there's not a lot of room for error. And obviously the pilots and all the mechanics and everybody who works on that side of things knows that. But we take it seriously, too.
We sure do. Well, good stuff, Chris. Thank you for joining me, talking about the newsletter, and even letting our customers know about what makes you the writer you are. So this has been great. Thank you for hanging out.
I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks so much.
That was so much fun. Thanks to Chris and, of course, our listeners for continuing to support the show and spending some time with us. This is Blackstone Joe signing off.
The Slick Talk podcast is powered by Blackstone Laboratories. If you're ready to start your oil analysis journey, visit blackstone-labs.com to order your free test kit.